My dad was a really successful man in business, and so was my grandfather. So I thought, oh well, it's got to run through us somehow.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
run with it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think because the work we do at Her Career around inspiring empowered moments where women accelerate career money network, this whole normalization of financial literacy and supporting people in that journey and insurance and what that means to different sectors
Mm.
is incredibly important. And that's another one of the reasons why I wanted to share from your perspective and
Yeah.
just make sure that I'm touching on questions where you feel you can share that in as much of a way as you'd like to.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think the big things that I'd like to talk about once we hit the ground running,
Yeah.
was next week or something, wasn't it? I can't
Yeah, it's next Wednesday. I'm just taking because I'll
Yeah.
probably put up like a 1 minute teaser from today's just as a
Oh, right.
yeah.
Oh, okay. I should have brushed my hair.
You look lovely.
Okay, good. Um, yeah, I really the focus of what I'm doing now, so all the groundwork that I'm doing now and these foundations that I'm building currently is the end game is to start to ease pressure on our public health system. So my view
Right.
is a lot of people think, and we do have a really good public system in
Yeah.
comparison to the
Worldwide
states, but a lot of
standards.
people
Yeah.
think, yeah, absolutely. But in some ways, we are failing because our acute care is really good. So if you have a heart attack or have a serious accident and you call an ambulance, you're going to get picked up and taken straight through. But where
Hmm.
we are failing now is with the delays in investigations in terms
Yeah.
of somebody having stomach pain. Like I'll use myself for a classic example. Took me 3 years to figure out that I had endometriosis,
Yeah.
and that was,
That's such an important story to tell. There are so many
oh,
women out there that I know as well, and I've had issues.
yeah.
Yeah, that just it's misdiagnosed or missed
Yeah,
or just discounted,
yeah, and
really.
your quality of life, and this is probably the first time that
Yeah.
I've actually voiced it because I started accepting it as normal.
Yeah.
The quality of life that I had at that time was really bad because I was really anxious of going out in case
Yeah.
like an attack came on, and you can't really describe it to anybody. It's
No.
the level of pain and the nauseousness. Like when I was policing and we had to wear the vests, I'd be
Oh,
sitting at my
yeah.
desk with my belt like sticking into my uterus. I was like, oh my God. And then,
Yeah.
and just being like, because you get really bad nausea. So I was in the car, the police car, like, oh man, I'm going to heave everywhere. But it was IBS, it was all this other stuff. And it took such a long time. And I think that was when endo was really starting to become, everybody was becoming more aware of it. I certainly hadn't
Yeah.
heard of it. So that was 7 8 years ago. But now I think in the private system they're far quicker at diagnosing it. But
Yes.
and I went through the private system, but first it took ages for them to get to the point where like, oh, this is what you've got. Let's get rid of it. Um, but my story, the reason why I was using that as an example for women that are in the public health system, from having those symptoms to having to wait to be seen by a specialist to then having to
Yeah.
be wait to have a MRI or a scan or an ultrasound or the wait for surgery. It goes on and on and on. And that's
Yeah.
just one example. There's problems with gallbladders, hip replacements, knee replacements, all of these things which really reduce your quality of life. And then there's the big stuff like finding out that you have cancer, for example. Like
Mm.
that can be a really slow diagnosis. And then you have
Yeah.
to wait for chemo. So it's
Yeah.
not, and then, if you don't get on top of that, essentially you're limiting your time on earth if you don't grab it quickly and you're not treating it as fast as you possibly can. Um,
Absolutely.
so my theory is through employment insurance, if we can start changing the mindset of Kiwis and having more of a mindset of what Americans have done, because a lot of their employers of choice are selected on what benefits they have to offer.
Yeah.
So when you have an employer providing insurance for you as a staff benefit, it means that all of your existing medical conditions are covered. So everyone's automatically accepted. There's no
Yeah.
faffing around in the public system. There's no issues with claims or people hating insurers because they're saying, oh, we're not going to cover that. That was something you've had in the past.
Yeah.
So I've had heaps of clients and friends that have had cancer really young, or abnormal smears that don't get,
Yeah.
and they'll get excluded for cervical cancer in the future. I think every woman in the world has had an abnormal smear. Mental
Yeah, that's
health
right.
mental health
Yeah.
for business owners in particular. I remember I went on antidepressants as an 18-year-old when our family dog died at age 15. But that
Right.
affects me as well. So the
Yeah.
insurer won't
Yeah.
touch me in terms of mental health things. So that's massive.
Yeah.
BMI issues, smokers' rates, they just annihilate you. So the only way, in my view, to avoid that is to get employers getting on board to help support our community and to
Yeah.
reduce the pressure on the public system for those that can't afford it, to
Yeah.
kind of create more of an equal footing in
Equal.
terms of
Yeah.
healthcare. And the end game for me is once we get to the point where we're profitable, we can start using those profits to bring specialist doctors to our shores to train us up on certain things, because a lot of I'll use my nephew for example. He passed away from cancer 2 years ago, and he was 2.5. His only treatment
Oh my goodness.
was available. Starship said we can't do anything more for him, so his only
Yeah.
available treatment was in New York with a specialist on child pediatric oncologist over there.
Wow.
And for others, so many people miss those opportunities to
Yeah.
save a life, and we kind of need to bring those skill sets to our shores to ensure that we are getting the best possible results and outcomes, that we have these chances to survive or even live longer to meet our grandchildren or have further opportunities. And
Yeah.
in my opinion, there's nothing more than important than staying alive.